Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sovereign Self Show. And today we're talking with Kayla Birch all about trigger response method, radical responsibility, and really what it means to be your sovereign self and be an entrepreneur. A little bit more about Kayla is she's a transformational coach, the creator of the Trigger Response Method, or TRM, and the founder of the Coaching Mastery Certification Program. She helps entrepreneurs break through their emotional triggers, overcome self-sabotage, and build confidence to grow aligned businesses. With over a decade of experience, Kayla integrates deep emotional healing with practical business strategies, guiding others to success through self-mastery and clarity. She also hosts the Emotional Revolution podcast, where she empowers listeners to create lasting transformation in life and in business. And if you like this show or you like the Emotional Revolution podcast, we've done a podcast swap. So depending on when you're listening to this, check out the other one because you're going to be able to get a feel for each of us at a deeper level. But with that all being said, Kayla, thank you so much for coming on to the Sovereign Self Show.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. It's so odd hearing all these things about you while you're just listening. Just yes, that's me. Yes,
Yeah?
those are all my descriptors. That's great.
I know being on the other side of the podcast guest interviewer kind of spectrum, it's like, okay, you got that muscle really going being the interviewer, but when you're on the other side, you're like, ooh, okay, this is how it feels. At least that's how I am. I'm like, okay, Lauren, you can do this. All right. But yeah, I would love to hear. We're very aligned on so many things. What does your sovereign self mean to you?
So for me, I just really feel like the sovereign self is just autonomy. And it's something that in my personal life, I had to really use my own ability, my own autonomy, and my ability to stand up for myself and advocate for myself. So even being an advocate for self is probably really huge in what I would describe as my sovereign self, but just pure freedom and just operating out of a place of open awareness and not from lack or longing, and just this really almost neutral state of just presence and being, but always advocating, always challenging, always questioning, always just showing up and just being willing to be different, to just be you, right? Just to be that version that it just shows up.
Yes, and I think for me, the sovereign self isn't a destination. It's continually keeping up with that expansion. There's no end goal, which I'm pretty sure we talked about that on your podcast as well.
Yeah.
But it's this journey. And sometimes when we're starting off on our journey, or maybe you were in the middle, because I've had, I don't even know how many dark nights of the souls at this point. I'm sure you can relate. How did you start off this journey? What kind of sparked this part of you to be the creator of TRM, to be the host of the Emotional Revolution podcast, and be that sovereign, radical, responsible being that you are today?
Yeah. So for me, it's like, it's always our lifelong unfolding, our lifelong journey of everything that gets us to this point. But the big key highlight for me to where I could really look back and say, this was a really pivotal moment and this is how I created this life I have today, was back when I was much younger. I was 19, but I had just had my first daughter and I just gotten married and I got really sick. So I ended up having Lyme disease. I was in a wheelchair. I was having multiple seizures a day. I had to have someone babysit me and my daughter because I was just so sick. And I didn't have autonomy, right? I didn't have choice for myself. I wasn't advocating for myself. And I got to this point and I realized that I didn't want to live anymore. I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm a burden to everyone around me. This isn't the way that I want my daughter to be raised, because she was having to take care of me. And she was just a baby, she was so little. She would cover me up with blankets and bring me stuffed animals because she could just feel my hurt. And I don't want to do this. My husband's young. He can find somebody else type of deal. And so I got to that point, and in that moment is when I actually realized, oh, I have choice, right? We have choice in life. I can choose to stay sick. And now people are going to be like, you don't choose to be sick, but in that moment, that's what I was doing. I was choosing my illness because I was identifying with it and it was becoming my entire identity. And when you're sick with something like Lyme disease, they actually call it, they say you're a limey and they tell you you're never going to get better. So I was so identified with it. And how could I let go of something that was my whole personality at the time? And so I was so wrapped up into that. So I realized I had a choice. I could stay sick or I could choose freedom and expansion and get better, or I could just, to be frank, just end it all, right? It just choice of just not being here. And that was the moment I feel like the first time in my life I actually understood choice and that ability to say yes or to say no or to move or to ebb or to flow in that way of just standing up for yourself and advocating for what you want. And in that, understanding what you want. Okay, so then of course here I am. So I chose health and we went to a whole holistic way, and that was kind of that, right? Then I moved on with my life. I had multiple children. I have 4 children now. And so moved on and started to realize, oh, I want to help people advocate for themselves. So I started health. So I started as a health coach. So I was like, I want people to advocate for their health because it took me so long and I had to fight so many different battles in the medical field and things like that to even be able to stand up for myself. And so that's what really led me to this revolution. I like to call it your emotional revolution, hence the name of the podcast, right? And this, my own personal revolution was just this understanding and this unfolding of how to stand up for yourself in this way. And that led me to where I'm at now, because I'm like, okay, it's more than health. It's our decisions. It's our attachment to our labels. It's how we identify. It's how we show up. It's how we experience life. And if we refuse to experience life any different, then we're going to continue the same path. And then I started to pick apart my own triggers, my own understanding, my own conditioned responses. And all of this is what created my method in what I share with my clients and those that listen and tune in or, find me in my retreats and things like that.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. And I mean, how I started this podcast, formerly called Witchy Wellness Radio. I was a health coach at the time. So we're so, it's so amazing. I love hearing the hero's journey because it's like people listening, we all can relate. We have these similar paths. And my mission is your body and emotions aren't in the way, they're leading the way. And Kayla, you're such a beautiful example of that. It's like our body's trying to say, excuse me, you're focused over here, but who you really are is over here. And that takes that pivoting of radical responsibility and kind of coming up with your own method. For me, it's like almost remembering these kind of things like, oh yeah, I know how, like through my own struggles and healing, I'm like, oh wow, this feels like I've known how to do this for a while. So I would love to hear deep diving in to your method, the trigger response method, TRM.
TRM.
Yes,
TRM. Simple to TRM, yeah. And so one big thing with the TRM is, we have 5 steps. And so the first one is identify your trigger. We can all do that. We know what makes us mad, right? What sets us off. And a trigger really is just something that elicits any type of emotional response in you. And so you can even do the TRM with happiness, right? But it's something that elicits a response within you. So that's step 1. Step 2, we go deeper into understanding where it came from. We start to understand the conditioned responses. We start to understand, go back to its origin, right? Likely in childhood, if we're going back to roots. Where did this belief originate from and what is the attachment and what am I really feeling? So we just start to really question it and start to observe it objectively. We're not judging. There's no judgment. There's no blame. We're not blaming our parents. We're not blaming situations or external factors because like we've talked about, we're stepping into radical responsibility. We are responsible for what's coming up within us. But the third point of the TRM is what most people get held up on. And it's the part that they don't like. And it's the part that they push back at the most about because it's your payoff. And so this is the thing that I think is missing. I would say anywhere that doesn't have this in it, like most places, they're not teaching you that you're gaining something from these behaviors. So that was me by staying on to this, this identity of being sick and having Lyme disease. My payoff was I got attention. My payoff was I got served in a certain way. And even though it was not the attention I wanted, it was the attention I was getting. And I was afraid to let go of that because what was I left with? And so there was a lot of different things wrapped up in that. That's hard to admit, right? You don't want to admit, oh, I'm getting attention from this and I like it. And it's not that I was attention seeking. It was just the byproduct of holding on to it. And so when you really realize that you're gaining something in return, and oftentimes your payoff is a form of protection, it's self-protection. And a lot of times we do need it until we don't anymore. So we have to honor that as well, that it's present for a purpose, but we can let it go when we have awareness around it. But the payoff is the piece that I think is probably the biggest linchpin to this whole thing, because people will try to pass it and they're like, I don't gain anything from this. And if you weren't gaining something from it, you wouldn't keep doing it. It's just simple as that, right? If it wasn't feeding and serving you in some way, you would have let it go a long time ago. So you have to be willing to explore that. And I think that's probably the biggest piece. And that's been the biggest piece for me for radical responsibility and truth telling. Because when you start to really evaluate your life and you understand why you're reacting the same way, or why your actions are the exact same way, or why you're stuck in these habit loops and all these different things that we do, the sabotage, all of that. And you say, if I'm going to get really honest with myself and I'm going to take responsibility with what I find, and I'm going to see what I gain from this, and then you're willing to let it go, everything changes. And so then we move into the fourth step. And the fourth step is that it's just full acceptance. I'm not judging. It's okay that it's here. It's okay that this has been what served me. This is okay. I don't have to blame. I don't have to be the victim anymore. I don't have to do all of that. I'm just going to allow it to be present. And then I'm going to make this step a different choice, a different reaction. My reaction's different. Now my response is different. Now how I'm showing up is different. And how the relationship with myself and the relationship with the trigger can't help but be changed once you go through those steps. So it doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean the next time the trigger arises that you don't fall back into those patterns. But with awareness, things dissolve. And so then it just starts to dissolve and you're not repeating exactly the same thing. It's getting a little bit better and a little bit better until all of a sudden we're not even reacting anymore.
Ooh, yes, that's step 3. I know it's a hit to the ego, but I find that when I do personally have that resistance to not wanting to take that responsibility, that's how I know I'm ready to. I know that sounds very counterintuitive. Like we did the cold plunge today, like an hour before this call, and I was like, I don't have time. I got to get ready. I feel a lot of resistance. Loren, you got to do it. You got to freaking do it, because that, I feel like for me, when I feel the resistance or hear all of those stories, I know I'm like on the leading edge about to be able to jump over. How does that come up for you and the clients you work with? I think a lot of people can relate to that step 3 feeling.
Yeah, the step 3 is truly the biggest one. And it's when that comes up with clients, and for me personally, I've worked through so much stuff. I'm really not as reactive. Like it's just very much of a flow. I don't hold on to things. They just flit through me, and it's great. It's because I put this into practice every day. I have so much awareness that at the beginning it was annoying. And just so side note, it's real annoying. Like awareness sometimes it's like, I just wish I wasn't aware. Like if I could just be less aware, maybe my life would be easier. Like ignorance feels like bliss, but eventually it's not, right? Eventually you actually don't have to, just evaluate every single motion or every thought that you have because you're so detached from them. But with clients, the thing is that, and I don't push the payoff, I challenge it. But if a client's like, oh, I can't see it, that's simply what it is. I can't make you see something, and you will not see it unless you're willing to see it. Like you will not see it. It will just keep happening and happening, and you'll get to blame. And Kayla's TRM doesn't work. It's like, no, payoff is there. And until you're aware of it, you will keep living in that. And so that's one of the big things. And working through it is just stepping into it. It's just not judging it. And a lot of times that judgment, that shame that we have around that payoff, like, the ego is like, oh, why would you do that? So now we have something else to focus on. Well, why would you keep doing this? And when you just want to seek attention. But when we don't live in shame and we don't live in blame and we just live in awareness with we're not judging it, then it really can dissolve, and it can dissolve quickly. And I think that's the biggest thing too. If somebody feels that resistance, it's saying, let me look at this resistance and what's the story I tell myself to judge it? Is it that I shouldn't be feeling this, or that I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't keep doing that? And when you look at that, you can say, well, that's not true because it's what's happening. So how could it be anything other than what's happening? And then you can start to just, again, change that relationship with it. And a lot of people, and I know a lot of your work is very like somatic in your body, and I love getting in your body, but I'm a huge, it's really funny for me to say it, I'm a huge head person. I love to use the head. And I've never been like this for my whole life. Like, I'm just like a person that acts and does things, and later I'm like, what did I just do? Like, what was that? And so, but you can really use your head to work through this by detaching from your thoughts and those emotions. And so sometimes, especially in the spiritual community, people are like, no, just get in your body and what feels right. And it's like, what feels right in your body is only feeling right because of what your head told it, what your head assigned to it. And so unless you use the mind, unless you get real heady with things and in the body, then you're just going to keep those repeated patterns.
100%. And for me, I guess it is the head. I always think about it like divine discipline. I think of the third chakra, the solar plexus, the willpower that we have to build, which is kind of the bridge from being in the body to your higher chakras. And yes, and I think that's a misconception about, oh, just be in your body. You got to be in your body to take the responsibility for all the feelings. And that's like a different way of saying the same thing you said is like, I've heard this from Bashar, who's a channeled entity, kind of like Abraham. And he said to complete the emotional circuit, there's a simple phrase and you can make it your own. I feel blank because I choose to believe I need to. Because when we're kids, when we have a tantrum or big emotions, like, I feel angry. And then it's just like this open-ended statement. And when we can, for me, that statement is a body and the mind combined, that willpower of like, okay, I feel this because I choose to believe I need to. It kind of wraps it around in a circle. And for me, it helps me own where I'm at. And it almost brings this bird eye view because I'm choosing this. And then for me, that kind of helps with the step 3 if you kind of are stuck there. But that one sentence has helped me and many of clients really just when you're feeling anything, and it works with happy feelings too, like what you were saying. It's the simple techniques like these that are super powerful when in the moment can help us complete the circuit, but also build the positive momentum forward too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And going back to that kind of that happiness space, because nobody talks about how to be less happy. Like, that's not a thing, right? Nobody's like, stop having so much joy. But what I find a lot of times is certain people, not everybody, this isn't true for everybody, but there are certain people who use joy and happiness as a crutch, and they're completely bypassing what they need to look at. And so if you don't question why you're holding on to joy and why you're too afraid to experience what feels like the lesser desirable emotions, then you will just stay stuck. And so, yes, you may feel joy, but it's not real joy. It's just a facade. It's just something that's hiding and pushing you back further from your full expression of yourself. And so you have to do it with all the things, why does this bring me joy? Well, this brings me joy because, and it always comes back to your self-righteous reasons, and that's okay too. Right? Because I get something from it, like this gift giving or this or that. Well, because I'm gaining something. So of course it brings me joy. And so it's just really important to question it and to understand like, oh my gosh, it's serving me in some way. Like you said, this completes a circuit because it's feeding me and feeding something within me. And unless I'm willing to let that go and step into something else, and that's unfamiliar because people don't like stepping into the unfamiliar. The ego doesn't like that. It's going to prevent that. It's going to create reasons not to do it. But that's the only way that's why I like to use business as my mirror. And with my clients is because there's no bigger mirror. Well, let me say this. There's a bigger mirror because if you have children or your spouse, those are those are probably your biggest mirrors. But those aren't the ones that we're always willing to work through because they feel too personal. Business doesn't always feel that personal. It does and it doesn't. We can separate from business much quicker than we can separate from spouse and children. And so I like to use business as that mirror and that example because once you learn to do it there, then you can do it with your spouse or your children or in other relationships. And so it's a really powerful aspect of just, okay, well, I want to do this deep work, but how do I do it? I'm super reactive to, my spouse. I'm super reactive and take things personal with my children. So that feels a little too raw. like, okay, well, lateral over if you own a business or you're working or you're do it with someone that's not so, it doesn't feel as vulnerable first, and then start to understand some things, and then you can move into it. That's just like a simple way to do it is for people who may be like, well, you know, I have this challenge with, I have a husband, so with my husband. And then it's like, I want to start there. But then all that does is bring up a lot more misunderstanding. And so it can be kind of confusing when we're too attached to it and we don't have a objective view of it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I mean, a lot of people, you could do it with different things like your body too,
Mhm.
healing
Yeah.
your body like you did.
Mhm.
But business, yeah, I think it's part of the spiritual kind of journey. I don't want to say evolution, but journey.
Mhm.
As you start to work through some stuff, heal parts of yourself, and you feel like your heart's so full, you want to give back, like it's just bursting to share. And then you realize, ooh, this is a new mirror. Maybe other things that, old wounds, because a lot of the people think that, they maybe healed something, but then their body might go back into a trigger or trauma like response in their business, putting themselves out there. So, how do you work with women who maybe the outside are very successful, but are kind of stuck in this perpetual survival mode, whatever their go to
Mhm.
responses, and they're like, no, this isn't aligned with that successful version of me, but
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so common too, especially I work with a lot of really successful women who they may not have their own business, but they're working in the corporate space and, just different areas. And the biggest thing there is it's the same. My favorite saying is same shit, different package, right? It doesn't actually matter what it is. We're all dealing with the same stuff. It's just coming to us in a different package. And you're likely dealing with the same shit in your own life, but it's just reoccurring and showing up on your doorstep in a different package. And so with that, it's the same thing. Like, why do you feel the need to perform? Now, getting success is something that we can always launch towards, and we can use it as a goal. And that's wonderful. But once you've attained a certain level of success, why is it never enough? And so then you start to evaluate what that means to you. What does success mean to you? Or what does this, if someone's not listening to you in a meeting, or, people aren't saying yes to your ideas, it's going to mean something to you because you've attached a meaning and an emotion and a thought to it. And so what do those things mean? And you just go through that TRM and you just start to, it's like the best tool because you can work through it in all the different areas. And so it's really powerful. And that's how you do it, no matter where you're at on this linear success scale, you can utilize your triggers to understand yourself and change your relationship with yourself, and then to show up differently in the world.
Beautiful. I know. Yeah, it's just I same shit, different package. I love that. I'm gonna have to borrow that one. I think of it as a through line through, how you do
Yeah.
anything is how
Mhm.
you do everything, because it's the energy that you are predominantly seeing the world from, being at every area of your life. And it's funny because like in my own life, and I see it time and time again, working with clients, is like, oh, we're working through this specific business lens or career lens. And then, like, one of my clients, she had Lyme as well. And so she was dealing with body stuff and healing that aspect. And ended up other areas of her life, the body, she ended up manifesting a dream boyfriend, like all these other areas, because it's all connected.
Mhm.
You can use the lens of business or career as a jumping in point, like you
Yeah.
said, because it's personal business, personal is hearing, the spouse or children, like
Mhm.
that's that can be a whole new level as well. But like, it never ceases to amaze me when you take that radical responsibility, when you're in that step 3 and start to step into step 4 and even 5. It's like, wow, okay, things are starting to change. Maybe business wise they're not, but I'm starting to feel better and my reality's changing. And sometimes people around me are changing. And that's like, let's start there, because it's like, okay, I'm doing the inner work, and then things start changing around you. And it's kind of like, oh, sometimes it can be scary at first. I see a lot of people going, oh, wait, this actually works.
Yeah. Yes. And that's a big thing too, is that people don't actually want it. Sometimes people don't actually want it to work. And so it working out is so scary. It's so unfamiliar. I like to say people aren't scared. I have a different way to look at it. I don't think people are scared of failure. I think people are scared of success because we experience failure since we learned to walk. Like we're used to it not working, but we're not used to it working out. It's something that we have conditioned ourselves not to experience. And so I think that's a really powerful shift of like, I don't want to do this because what if it works out? And well, crap, if it works out, now I have to shatter every paradigm I've ever created about myself. That was me. Like I couldn't have success because if it worked out, well, every paradigm I built around who I was, my identity, what I attached myself to of not being smart enough, not being capable, all these different things. Well, I was going to have to let that go. And I wasn't until I don't know what point, I wasn't willing to let it go. So I kept sabotaging myself over and over and over. And people don't like that. And it's like, but that's what limits you from success, is because you're scared of what happens at the next level. And it's so unfamiliar, and you're holding on to a story and a paradigm about yourself that you're just not willing to let go of yet. So it's always in your timing. I can't take it from you. It's your story. I can't take that story and that belief and that paradigm from you. You have to shatter it yourself.
Yes. And I think it's not bypassing the triggers and how we're feeling, really being able to be in that and shift. But equally, it's practicing the success, like embodying that too, because you're right, it's unknown and unfamiliar. So then the ego has all these other stories about that. But those two, they're not, one's more important, but it's feeling, owning where we're at, doing the inner work to process, and practicing who we want to be and getting familiar, like in every situation, like when I'm at the grocery store, when I'm stuck in traffic, when I'm talking to my spouse, when I'm on a podcast. Like what I do that when I'm already feeling like in a pretty good mood, and I can start to go from this general state to kind of visualizing and feeling, or going for a walking meditation is awesome. And just play around. For me, it's a playful thing. Like just play around with like being $1 million business. How would I walk right now? For me, we don't have kids yet, but I focus on like, how would I be right now as my millionaire mom self? Like, how would I be walking down the beach with my kid? Like, your energy will shift.
Yeah.
Like it, hands down. So I would love to hear like your personal practices, how you help people really start to practice and embodying that. I don't want to say successful version, but I mean, really who you are.
It is. Yeah, it is, right? Like, it feels like we're dismissing the current version, because you can be successful now as well, but there is another level. Like there's always this other creation. And so what I really encourage people to do is, if you're looking at this next version that you want to become, because we're always becoming something. And that's the paradox of it, is that we're always becoming something. And so when you say, I want to be this, what does my millionaire mom look like? Well, what do I have to do today to become that? And so what do I have to remove to be that? What's in my way from experiencing that right now? Right? Like if I want to feel like this really successful businesswoman, and I have a business, but I'm like, well, it's just not yet. I don't have the numbers. It's like, no, how do you experience that success today? Honor that and remove all of the different thoughts and the beliefs and the conditioning that's in your way to be able to actually experience it. Because by holding on and saying, well, I'm not that, or I have to do this and I have to do that, now we're getting stuck in that payoff again. Well, if you don't understand why you're spinning in that circle, you're just going to keep spinning in that circle. So you're not going to actually step into the embodiment of it. And then you have to ask yourself, what am I scared of? Who would I be if I was that? What do I have to leave behind? And that's really scary, because if I'm that, if I become a successful business owner, or if I become a millionaire mom, that means I'm not something else anymore. And sometimes if we look at it from that perspective, we open up something we couldn't have seen, right? Well, now again, for me, my story was that if I became really successful, I couldn't be stupid anymore. I didn't have that excuse that I was dumb and not capable, because that was my whole life story, my journey. It was just everything I attached it to. And so that's a really beautiful part of just saying, well, what am I going to have to leave behind if I am this? And that can really open up some spaces for you to explore in a way that you might not have been able to previously.
I love that. I got chills. And brief side note, but I remember when I was going through a divorce, I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew it was not in alignment with me anymore, but I had to give myself the space to mourn that reality. That was no longer reality, even though I knew that wasn't in alignment with who I was. And that was a huge leaping jump pad into, who I am now. Like, that's what I kept focusing on. At that time, I was still health coaching and focusing on, well, how do I want to help women? And like, that really drove me through that transition period. So thank you for pointing that out, because I think so many of us listening can relate to that. And I want to hear more, and we're going to start to close the show down-ish, more about your coaching mastery certification program. Because if people are listening, they're probably like, tell me more. How can we work with Kayla?
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for asking about that. That is one of my biggest passion projects right now. I love it. I just finished my first cohort. I graduated 14 transformational coaches from my first round. So amazing. And so it's actually an internationally accredited program as well. So you can become an accredited coach afterwards. I just got through with that process. And it's really powerful. But the way that I approach it is very much, it's based in the TRM method and the way that I do and the way that I approach it. But one of the biggest things is that what I find, I've done this work for a long time, and I worked for a huge name company in the industry and trained coaches there. And what I had found is that coaches when you doubt yourself, when you're not confident, when you don't understand your own triggers and you're reacting to the client, you're not a very successful coach. And so in this program, I actually created it to where you're working on your own triggers along the way. And so it's built in with the process that when you start to feel resistance or, a lack of clarity, that we're working through what that actually means to you. And we're doing what we just talked about in this whole episode. We're moving that out of the way. So when you in that program, we also go through we go through skill and we create your signature program as well. It's a freaking phenomenal certification program, if I do say so myself. But by the end of it, you're launched and you're ready. You're not holding yourself back. You don't get to that point where you're like, now what? Like, well, now what do I do with this? I have some skill, I have some understanding, but I don't feel confident in the application of it. And so all of that is built into the program that I just love. Like, it's something that what I've found with my clients is the difference between, or my students, from the difference when they started to where they ended was night and day. Like, their confidence, their ability, to hear what wasn't being heard with their clients, which is a skill. That's a big skill, is to actually hear what someone's not saying. And then to challenge that and not be scared to challenge. I don't know about you, but a lot of coaches I know, they won't challenge. They're too scared to challenge because it means, what if the client doesn't like it or they push back? But all that does is leave your client without transformation. And then that's the exact thing that you're trying to avoid by not challenging. So we work through all these stories and this understanding, and I could talk about it forever, but it's a really powerful program. I absolutely love it. So to sum it up, it's a deep transformation. I teach you how to have transformation within yourself, so then you can create those containers of transformation with your clients.
Ooh. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but who is this for? Somebody who already has a business, who hasn't started yet? Like, people are interested. What parts of the journey are?
So it's for both. So you could already be a coach, you could already have a certification, but you're just feeling a lack of you're not creating the transformation you want within your clients. Well, there's quite a few reasons why, and I address all of that in the coaching certification. So you could be established and you're just like, it's just not working. I need more confidence. I need more understanding. I need more skill. There's a lot of skill. There's a lot of high level skills that aren't discussed in a lot of programs in the course. So you could be established and you just want to continue that education. That's wonderful. And sometimes people just want to become accredited. So you can do that. Or if you just want to start off fresh and you're just like, I want to be a coach, it's something I'm drawn to, I know it, I can feel it in my bones, then you just start off in this, wonderful foundation, and then you're hitting the ground running. So it's really for either. In my last cohort, I had both people that were already established coaches, came back. They're like, I need more skill. I'm not creating the transformation I want. I didn't learn what I needed to from my coaching course, that certification that they were in. And then people that were just like, this is my life's calling. I'm going to start now.
Oh, I love, love, love it. Was there anything else on your heart, Kayla, before we start to close down that you wanted to share or wrap up? I know we covered a lot today.
Oh, we did. That's how I am. Like, clear, direct, let's get to it. We're going to get through all these things. No, I just really appreciate this space and this willingness. It's so amazing to be talking to people who are willing to go deep and understand and pull apart and take radical responsibility. That's not something that's super common in our society's responsibility for self. And so it's such a beautiful journey. And so I just encourage everyone to do that, to step into radical responsibility in your life. Tell yourself the truth over and over and over. And with that, understand what the truth is. Understand if it's coming from a place of lack or fear, or if it's ego speaking, or if it's the true self. So that's it. Just really step into your own self. Really allow that to come to the surface.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your presence and your wisdom with us today. It's such an honor sharing this space and learning from you, absorbing this. I know everybody listening feels the same way. How may we, as the listeners, as a huge act of gratitude, be of service for you and return today, Kayla?
Thank you. You can find me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Kayla Birch. My YouTube channels, I just started those recently. So Kayla Birch is our Kayla Birch Coaching YouTube, and also, of course, the Emotional Revolution podcast. You can download, find me, subscribe on YouTube or your podcast listening, and that's it. I also have a free resource I can, if that's open for you, the TRM to walk through it. Right, that's my life's passion, is helping people walk through their triggers. So that's just so, I just want the world to be able to step into their own responsibility and understand their trigger and be less responsive. So that's also a huge gift for me, is just allowing yourself to do that for yourself so you can help change the world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All those resources will be in the show notes. If you guys haven't already subscribed, whether any podcast platform or on YouTube as well, please hit subscribe. And if you could write a review, this helps us and Kayla's podcast as well get the good vibes out there and reach more souls who are ready to take that radical responsibility. So thank you so much, Kayla, for coming on the show. And I will talk to you guys all next week.